So as I was sitting here reading an article and watching a video and thinking about the power move that Taylor Swift has been making, like that she currently is making, it instantly reminded me of Master P and Frank Ocean. And the reason I say that is because I do believe that all three, like Taylor Swift, Master P, and Frank Ocean, all have one major thing in common, which is they have all, despite dealing with a very shady music industry and record labels, all three of them have found little loopholes that they were able to use and manipulate to gain some sort of edge. And once they did that, it blew up. It made a lot of noise. It was a big deal. And of course, because the record labels are always trying to set it up for them to win, they became very angry and obviously try to avoid ever having to, get almost get finessed, trying to avoid ever trying to avoid it ever happening to them again, right? So Taylor Swift, obviously, she's been a pop superstar for almost like 20 years now. Like she was signed originally to a country label called Big Machine Records. It's owned by Scooter Braun, who is, Justin Bieber's manager. That's what he's most known for. But obviously she put out a lot of music over the years, and she didn't own the rights to her music. She didn't own her masters, right? Which goes to show that this is a problem that goes across genres. Like so often, especially with people within like hip hop, they love to live in this bubble where they're under the impression that their label problems are exclusive to them, when in reality, regardless of what genre you do, they're all dealing with the same BS. Like Taylor Swift is literally a pop superstar. She's one of the most famous people. She's one of the most famous people on the planet. And even she it was trying to figure out how to, get from under a really crappy record deal. So she realized that the only thing she could do is ex- um she could explore a certain kind of like loophole where she's literally just re-recorded her old songs, which is not a new tactic, but it's a tactic that most people typically don't do, especially not when they're still in the prime of their careers. But she decided to do it, and it's worked out perfectly. Well, just about perfect. It's worked out as close to perfect as she could hope, right? She has an extremely massive and loyal fan base that she calls the Swifties, and she's been asking them to just keep playing and streaming and buying and just supporting her re-recorded versions of her old albums. And it's generated, billions of streams. Like even I was going through this article on Billboard that I just wanted to read a quick snippet of. So it says well, the title for the article says labels want to prevent Taylor's version like re-recordings from ever happening again. Record companies are trying to keep artists from re-recording their songs for longer periods of time, and in some cases ever again. The major labels, Universal Music Group, Sony Music Group, and Warner Music Group, have recently overhauled contracts for new signees. According to top music attorneys, some are demanding artists wait an unprecedented 10, 15, or even 30 years to re-record releases after departing their record companies. And then this is a quote from one of the attorneys right here. The first time I saw it, I tried to get rid of it entirely, says Josh Karp, a veteran attorney who has viewed the new restrictions in UMG contracts. I was like, what is this? This is strange. Why would we agree to further restrictions than we've agreed to in the past with the same label? I recently did a deal with a big indie that had a 30-year re-record restriction in it, which obviously is much longer than I'm used to seeing. Adds Savor, attorney for cigarettes after sex, built to spill, and Jeff Rosenstock. I think the majors are also trying to expand their re-record restrictions, but in a more measured way. They are not generally able to get away with making such extreme changes. Now, to me doesn't seem measured. That to me doesn't seem like they're trying to ease their way into it. If one of these lawyers right here is claiming that if he's claiming that they just did a deal with what they call a big indie artist who just had a deal signed where they put a 30-year restriction on them re-recording their music. But still, again, the general point of this article is because of the fact that they are mad that Taylor Swift kind of found a way to maneuver around the BS that they did, and because she's such a massive uh, pop star, like pretty much like a pop icon at this point, they know that she has massive influence, so they're trying their hardest to avoid other artists taking the same approach. Because again, no matter what, their goal isn't to actually create a favorable deal where both people can win. Like ultimately, they want to set it up to where it's a game that's rigged only for them to win. And again, like I said, anytime an artist or somebody who may be considered like an outsider finds a loophole, they get pissed and they dramatically try to change contracts and change the standards. Why? Because, like I just said, they want to set up a rigged game where nobody can win except them, no matter which way you flip it. And again, this is something that Taylor Swift, Master P, and Frank Ocean have in common, right? Everybody knows, Master P's origin story where he paid, I believe he said $25,000 to have a consultation with Michael Jackson's attorney, where he found out that, hey, he can get a much bigger part of I believe either the masters or the publishing. He could get a bigger part. He could negotiate a much larger percentage if he does a distribution deal through the labels instead of signing to them as just a regular artist. Obviously, Master P took full advantage of that. He had a massive cut. I believe he said he had like an 80 instead of it being set up to where the labels get 85% and they only give Master P 15%. He actually, because he set the deal up right, he was getting 85% and the labels were only getting 15. They were furious. Obviously, they weren't allowing people to just get away with that after that. And then again, in the case of Frank Ocean, I'm sure people remember a few years ago where he dropped that weird album on Apple Music. Come to find out that the reason he technically dropped two different albums, but the reason he did it like that was the album that he threw out there on Apple Music. Not only did he get paid, I think it was like 20 million for that from Apple Music, but that counted towards his contractual obligations with, I believe he was signed to Def Jam or whoever, but still he used that as a way of weaseling out of his deal by counting it as an album released under that contract, and then immediately proceeded to release an independent album himself. Obviously, the album everybody knows that he called Blonde, right? And as you could imagine, the labels were furious about it, and I'm sure they set up more restrictions in these contracts to try to avoid that. So anytime stories like this pop up, it's still just really interesting to be kind of seeing different artists try to find different loopholes. But to me, in the long term, I really think the only real solution is for a massive number of artists to just truly choose to just go independent and stay independent. Obviously, it's easier said than done because the biggest issue many independent artists run into is just not having money to just pay their day-to-day bills and stuff like that. But at the same time, there are other ways to make money. So I still think going independent is definitely the way to go. That's clearly where I'm drawing my line in the sand. Cause even though it's cool to see these stories about artists who did sign, try to find, loopholes, ultimately it's gonna be really hard for the average artist to do the same thing because number one, they're not gonna have that many loopholes in these contracts. They put so many restrictions in them, right? And you don't want to have to wait. You don't want to sign and then have to wait years to try to figure out how you can find a loophole to get out of the bad deal. It's just you can spend that same time just not signing the deal at all and just trying to find another way that you could, make some money and invest it back in your own music and just go from there. But if you listen this far into the video, I appreciate it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Do you believe that Taylor Swift, Master P, and Frank Ocean all found loopholes that will change music forever, or do you think that it'll be just a blip on the radar and n- like the record labels will reverse everything that they did and it'll be as if none of these things ever happened? And do you think, despite all these stories, people will continue to sign?